The shares are mine, Ethan said flatly, fingers already flying across his phone screen as the heart monitor wailed its final note. I stood in the doorway, my father's hand still in mine, watching my brother's carve up his empire while his body was still warm. Lucas had his laptop open, spreadsheets glowing on the screen, whispering numbers like prayers. "We can't lose the Manhattan property," he muttered. "The board will expect stability by market open. Then we move fast," Ethan replied. "Press release before 8. Lawyers by 9. Neither of them noticed when the nurse slipped in to silence the monitor. Neither of them looked at the man who had built everything we had. 3 days later, we sat in his corner office for the will reading. The city skyline blazed gold behind the windows, and my brothers looked every inch the moguls they'd become. Custom suits, polished shoes, emotionless faces. Attorney Harold Finch cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, your father's will is unusual. Just give us the breakdown," Ethan said. "We have a company to run." Harold's hand trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. "Ethan Grant receives the CEO position and 45% of the company's shares. Lucas Grant receives another 45% and the Central Park penthouse. The car collection to Ethan. The art collection to Lucas." Lucas checked his watch, bored. "And the rest?" Harold hesitated, then looked at me. "To my youngest son, Noah Grant, I leave personal item number 9 beta." The silence was so sharp I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Ethan frowned. "What the hell is 9 beta? Harold reached into his briefcase and pulled out a black smartphone. Not new, not old, just plain. Its lock screen glowed with a single number. 241 days remaining. "That's it," Lucas scoffed. "A phone." "The will is explicit," Harold said. "The device belongs solely to Noah Grant. Any attempt by others to take, open, or destroy it will result in immediate forfeiture of their inheritance." Ethan stood up, jaw tight. "There has to be more. The missing 10% of shares, the offshore accounts. Where are they?" "All remaining assets," Harold said carefully, "are held in trust. The release conditions are sealed." And just like that, everything changed. The looks they gave me weren't brotherly anymore. Ethan's expression hardened, calculating. Lucas's smile vanished. Within a week, my access cards were disabled. Security showed up at my apartment with boxes and a signed order. Lucas was there, arms crossed. "Dad spoiled you long enough," he said. "Time to live in the real world." They took everything. My mother's necklace, my laptop, the last photos I had of Dad. All I had left was my rusted Honda, a duffel bag of clothes, and that locked phone. It sat on the passenger seat, silent except for the countdown blinking across the screen. 240 days remaining. And for the first time, I wondered what my father had hidden, and why he trusted only me to find it. "The shares are mine," Ethan said flatly, fingers already flying across his phone screen as the heart monitor wailed its final note. I stood in the doorway, my father's hand still in mine, watching my brother's carve up his empire while his body was still warm. Lucas had his laptop open, spreadsheets glowing on the screen, whispering numbers like prayers. "We can't lose the Manhattan property," he muttered. "The board will expect stability by market open. Then we move fast," Ethan replied. "Press release before 8. Lawyers by 9. Neither of them noticed when the nurse slipped in to silence the monitor. Neither of them looked at the man who had built everything we had. 3 days later, we sat in his corner office for the will reading. The city skyline blazed gold behind the windows, and my brothers looked every inch the moguls they'd become. Custom suits, polished shoes, emotionless faces. Attorney Harold Finch cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, your father's will is unusual. Just give us the breakdown," Ethan said. "We have a company to run." Harold's hand trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. "Ethan Grant receives the CEO position and 45% of the company's shares. Lucas Grant receives another 45% and the Central Park penthouse. The car collection to Ethan. The art collection to Lucas." Lucas checked his watch, bored. "And the rest?" Harold hesitated, then looked at me. "To my youngest son, Noah Grant. I leave personal item number 9 beta." The silence was so sharp I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Ethan frowned. "What the hell is 9 beta?" Harold reached into his briefcase and pulled out a black smartphone. Not new, not old, just plain. Its lock screen glowed with a single number. 241 days remaining. "That's it." Lucas scoffed. "A phone. The will is explicit," Harold said. "The device belongs solely to Noah Grant. Any attempt by others to take, open, or destroy it will result in immediate forfeiture of their inheritance." Ethan stood up, jaw tight. "There has to be more. The missing 10% of shares, the offshore accounts. Where are they?" "All remaining assets," Harold said carefully, "are held in trust. The release conditions are sealed." And just like that, everything changed. The looks they gave me weren't brotherly anymore. Ethan's expression hardened, calculating. Lucas's smile vanished. Within a week, my access cards were disabled. Security showed up at my apartment with boxes and a signed order. Lucas was there, arms crossed. "Dad spoiled you long enough," he said. "Time to live in the real world." They took everything. My mother's necklace, my laptop, the last photos I had of Dad. All I had left was my rusted Honda, a duffel bag of clothes, and that locked phone. It sat on the passenger seat, silent except for the countdown blinking across the screen. 240 days remaining. And for the first time, I wondered what my father had hidden, and why he trusted only me to find it. He sat behind his mahogany desk, shoulders slumped beneath the glow of the desk lamp. The city shimmered behind him through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but that night, Richard Grant looked older than 62. "Noah," he said quietly, sliding a small black phone across the desk. "This is yours when I'm gone." "Dad, come on. Don't talk like that. Listen to me." His voice had a sharpness that made me stop breathing. "Your brothers will get what they expect. You'll get what you deserve. It won't feel fair at first. You'll want to give up. Don't. I don't understand." He stood, walking to the window. The skyline's reflection fractured across the glass, slicing through his expression. "Your mother saw it in you," he said softly. "The ability to see worth where others see waste. To hold on when everyone else lets go. This phone will test that. Promise me you'll keep it safe. Promise me you won't give up, no matter what happens." "I promise," I said, not sure why my throat felt tight. He smiled faintly, like he knew I didn't understand yet but would. 3 days later, he collapsed in the middle of a board meeting. "Heart attack," they said. "Instant." By the time the ambulance arrived, Richard Grant was gone. I stood alone in his study that night, the air still smelling of bourbon and old paper. The phone sat in my palm, heavier than it should have been. A lock screen. No signal. No clue. Only silence. I didn't know then that it would cost me everything before revealing why my father had trusted me more than anyone. 10 days after he died, we gathered in his office for the will reading. The atmosphere was tense, sterile. The same office where he'd given me the phone felt colder, emptier. Attorney Harold Finch sat behind the desk, his silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the city lights. His hand shook slightly as he unfolded the papers. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but heavy, "your fathers will include some unconventional provisions." I advised him to reconsider, but Mr. Grant was insistent. Ethan leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. "Just read it, Harold. We've got a company to stabilize." Harold adjusted his glasses. "To my eldest son, Ethan Grant, I leave the position of Chief Executive Officer and 45% of Grant Logistics shares, with full voting rights." Ethan nodded once, unsurprised. He'd been preparing for that moment since college. "To my middle son, Lucas Grant," Harold continued, "I leave 45% of the company's shares, as well as the Central Park penthouse and all contents within." Lucas's lips curved in satisfaction. "That'll do," he murmured, already calculating the value. Then Harold paused. He looked at me. "To my youngest son, Noah Grant, he said slowly. I leave personal item number 9 beta to be released immediately upon reading of this will. The silence was so thick it felt alive. Ethan stopped tapping his pen. Lucas frowned. My pulse hammered in my ears. That's it. Ethan's voice dropped an octave. That's all he gets. Harold reached into his briefcase and pulled out the phone. The same one my father had given me. This device is encrypted and secured by biometric authentication. Your father's will states that it belongs solely to Noah Grant. Any attempt by others to access, remove, or destroy it will result in immediate forfeiture of their inheritance. Lucas laughed, short and sharp. You're telling me he left him a locked phone while we're dividing millions? That's ridiculous. There's no mistake, Harold said evenly. I witnessed Mr. Grant draft this clause myself. The remaining 10% of shares and any undistributed assets are held in trust under sealed conditions. Ethan shot to his feet, chairs scraping the marble floor. This is insane. Noah barely graduated high school. He spent his time playing warehouse worker while we kept this company running. And you're saying Dad left him some secret gadget. Maybe it's his way of giving him nothing, Lucas sneered. Or maybe it's full of Dad's Bitcoin fortune. They demanded I try to unlock it right there, both leaning over me like predators circling prey. I tried everything. My birthday, Mom's, the company founding date, their birthdays, the year of his first truck purchase. Nothing worked. Only a single line glowed across the screen. 243 days remaining. It's worthless, Ethan said, shoving his chair back. Just like his contribution to this family. A week later, the eviction notice arrived. Security cleared out my things while Lucas watched from the doorway, coffee in hand. Dad's cherry project is over, he said, smirking. Time for you to see how the real world works. They kept everything. The photos, Mom's ring, even my laptop. All I had left was an old car, a bag of clothes, and that phone that refused to open. Every night, I stare at that countdown ticking away. 243 days. Whatever waited on the other side of that timer, I was starting to think my father hadn't left me nothing. He'd left me a challenge. When I pulled up to the building that used to be home, 2 uniformed guards were already waiting at the door. One held a clipboard. The other had my backpack slung over his shoulder like it was garbage. Lucas stood in the doorway, arms folded, overseeing the eviction like it was another business transaction. This is a family property, he said without looking at me. And according to the will, you're technically not family anymore, are you? I stared at him, stunned. Where am I supposed to go? He shrugged. Not a problem, Noah. Maybe one of your warehouse friends has a spare couch. They tossed my things into the hallway. Clothes, books, my old gaming console, even my mother's cookbook with her handwritten notes inside. I tried to stop them, but Ethan arrived with a company lawyer in tow, calm as ever. Let's not make this difficult, he said. You got what Dad wanted you to have, a phone. Be grateful it wasn't nothing. They watched me walk out with a single duffel bag. The door shut behind me with the kind of finality that felt like an execution. That night, I parked my beat-up Honda Civic behind a Walmart and tried to sleep. The black phone sat on the dashboard, the screen faintly glowing with that cursed timer. 228 days remaining. I tried everything. Tech repair shops, online encryption specialists, even a computer science professor at NYU who owed a favor to one of the warehouse guys. None of them could open it. This isn't commercial grade, the professor told me, squinting at the circuitry. This is military-level encryption. Maybe higher. I was broke within a month. My savings disappeared fast. First the gas money, then food. I got a job at a roadside diner, washing dishes 12 hours a day. My car became my apartment. I'd shower at a 24-hour gym until my membership expired, then switched to sink showers and rest stops. Meanwhile, my brothers were living like royalty. Ethan announced an overseas expansion, his name plastered across financial magazines. Lucas threw champagne parties in the penthouse, the same home I grew up in, posing for photos with influencers and models. They didn't mention me once. But I kept that phone. I couldn't explain why. Maybe guilt. Maybe hope. Every night, I'd lie in the back seat of my Civic, listening to the rain hit the roof, watching that countdown tick down one number at a time. Sometimes I wonder if my father had lost his mind at the end. Other times, I heard his voice in my head, "Don't give up." When my 18th birthday came, I didn't have a cake or candles. Just rain pounding against my car windows and the smell of cold coffee. I was parked at a rest stop off I-95. Same spot truckers sometimes left me leftover sandwiches when they recognized me. At exactly 6 a.m., the screen on the phone lit up. The timer vanished. My breath caught. A single contact appeared. Richard's legacy. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. I pressed call. 3 rings. Then his voice, clear, strong, and impossible. "Happy birthday, son," Richard Grant said. "You made it. You kept your promise. You reached the age." My heart stopped. "If you're hearing this," he continued, "it means you didn't give up. You didn't sell the phone when you were broke. You didn't let your brothers take it. You held on when logic said to let go." That's what I needed to know. The rain outside blurred the windshield as his voice filled the car. "Your brothers failed their test the moment they chose greed over trust. They took what looked valuable and threw away what truly mattered. But you understood. Worth isn't always visible on the surface." The phone screen flickered. Coordinates appeared, followed by a string of text. "Building 47, Grand Industrial Park, Sublevel 3. Access code 9 Beta Crown 1960. You have 72 hours before transfer protocols activate. After that, everything goes to the backup beneficiary. Don't let that happen, Noah. Everything I truly built is waiting for you." The message ended. The phone went dark again. I sat there in the silence, drenched in disbelief. Building 47 was part of a rundown industrial complex 40 miles outside the city, one my brothers had tried to sell years ago, calling it dead weight. Dad had vetoed every attempt. I never knew why. I had $17 in my pocket and half a tank of gas. The drive took an hour through the storm. By the time I reached Grand Industrial Park, the place looked deserted. Cracked pavement, weeds swallowing the chain-link fences, windows coated in grime. But one building had lights on. 47. A single security booth stood outside, and the man inside made my chest tighten with recognition. Samuel Reed, the night security supervisor who used to sneak me coffee during warehouse shifts. He looked up as my headlights swept across the booth, and when he saw me, he smiled like he'd been waiting. When I pulled up to Building 47, rain still clinging to the edges of my windshield, I saw a faint glow coming from a security booth. Samuel Reed looked up from his newspaper and smiled like he'd been expecting me for years. "Right on time, Noah," he said, standing and brushing crumbs from his uniform. "Your father said you'd come around eventually." My pulse kicked up. "Samuel, what are you doing out here? I thought you were still with the main office downtown." He reached into the booth and slid a worn key card through the window. "I go where I'm needed. Mr. Grant reassigned me here 3 years ago. My only job since then has been to keep this building ready for you." "You knew about all this?" I asked, my voice cracking a little. He nodded once, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I know enough. Take the loading dock around the back. The elevator's hidden behind a maintenance panel. Your card will get you through. The rest, that's between you and him." The inside of the building looked nothing like the abandoned exterior. Polished floors, motion sensors humming softly overhead. The air smelled faintly of ozone and antiseptic. Every hallway camera tracked my movement like an unseen observer. The elevator wasn't labeled, just a narrow steel door behind a false wall. My keycard unlocked it with a single green blink. It carried me down, so far I lost track of the floors. When the doors finally opened, I was staring at another door. Industrial steel, sealed tight, requiring a code. My father's voice echoed in my memory. 7 Alpha Crown 1960. The year he was born. When I entered it, The lock released with a pressurized hiss. Cold air swept out, tinged with the faint smell of oil and electricity. What lay beyond that door didn't belong beneath a logistics warehouse. The sublevel was massive, at least 3,000 square feet, maybe more. Banks of screens covered one wall, flashing between maps, cargo manifests, and coded data strings. Shipping routes ran across countries I barely recognized: Syria, Yemen, Venezuela, Sudan. But these weren't commercial trade lines. They were something else entirely. Servers lined the eastern wall, glowing like a constellation of tiny stars. The low hum of cooling fans filled the air, rhythmic and oddly comforting. And in the center, under a pool of soft light, stood a single mahogany desk. I recognized it immediately. It had belonged to my grandfather before my father inherited it. On the desk sat three things: a leather-bound journal, a laptop, and a framed photo of my mother holding me as a newborn. My chest tightened. The journal was open to the last page my father ever wrote. His handwriting was still steady, firm. No, it began: "If you're reading this, it means you kept your promise. It means you didn't sell the phone, didn't abandon it, didn't give in when everything around you told you to. That was your test. What your brothers inherited is visible. What you found here is what truly matters. The company known as Grant Logistics is legitimate, but it's only the surface. The heart of our work lives beneath it, the Grant Foundation. For 20 years, I've used our routes to move what the world refuses to deliver: medical supplies, food, education materials, technology, into the places that need them most, where official help never goes." My throat went dry as I kept reading. Every loss Ethan complained about was actually aid delivered under cover of business expenses. Every unprofitable route Lucas tried to cancel was a humanitarian corridor disguised as a shipment. The wealth you see above ground is camouflage for what truly saves lives. The system you're standing in front of connects us to hundreds of teams across 40 countries. They work in silence, risk everything, and believe in something more than profit. And now it's yours. The laptop came to life the moment my fingers brushed the trackpad. No password. Dozens of encrypted accounts opened one after another. Banks in Zurich, Singapore, Panama, the Caymans. My eyes blurred at the total: $412 million spread across hidden humanitarian funds. A sticky note in my father's handwriting clung to the corner of the screen. "This isn't money, Noah. It's responsibility." Before I could even take that in, the phone in my pocket started to ring. Not a recording this time. A live call. The ID read only. Foundation command. I answered with trembling hands. "Hello, Mr. Grant," a composed British voice said on the other end. "My name is Harrison Pike. I'm Director of Operations for the Grant Foundation. Your father told us you would call on your 18th birthday. We've been expecting you." For a long second, I couldn't form words. "You're real? This is all real?" "Very much so, sir," Harrison replied calmly. "For over 2 decades, your father built one of the largest covert humanitarian networks in the world. We operate where others can't: conflict zones, embargoed regions, and areas unreachable by sanctioned NGOs. Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, we've saved more than 2 million lives across 47 nations." I turned, staring at the glowing screens showing routes and shipments moving in real time. "My brothers, Ethan and Lucas, they don't know. They know only what they were meant to," Harrison said. "They inherited the public empire. You inherited the mission, the true legacy." I tried to steady my breathing. "Why me? I barely finished school. I worked in a warehouse." "Because your father didn't need another businessman," Harrison replied. "He needed someone who would keep a promise even when it hurt. Someone who understood that value isn't in what shines, but in what endures." His voice softened. "The phone you carried wasn't just encrypted. It was adaptive. It monitored how you lived, how you chose, how you endured. Your brothers were tested too, Mr. Grant. The moment they chose profit over family, they failed. The moment you slept in your car and still held onto that phone, you passed. I stood there, surrounded by a world my father had built in secret, realizing that the man I thought I knew had been quietly saving millions. He hadn't left me nothing. He'd left me everything that truly mattered. And for the first time since his death, I understood what he meant when he said, "You'll get what you deserve." Because this wasn't about inheritance. It was about purpose. Harrison's voice stayed calm, even as my pulse quickened. Those summers in the warehouse weren't busy work. Noah, he said, your father was training you from the ground up. Every box you lifted, every manifest you touched, that was part of your education. I leaned back in the leather chair, the enormity of it sinking in. Training me? For what? To lead, Harrison replied simply. To understand the heartbeat of what your father built. He didn't want another executive who lived behind glass walls. He wanted someone who could see the people who make the machine work. He paused. The men and women you thought were co-workers. They weren't just warehouse staff. 17 of them were foundation operatives. The names hit me like echoes from another life. Carlos, the night shift manager who taught me about rerouting shipments without raising alarms. Marcus, who showed me how to disguise high-value cargo as scrap metal. Elena, who drilled me on supply chain redundancies. I thought they were just patient teachers helping a clueless teenager. But now it was clear, they'd been preparing me for something much larger than a warehouse promotion. They weren't teaching me to be a worker, I said slowly. They were teaching me how to move things without getting caught. Precisely, Harrison replied. Your father wanted you to know how to operate in the shadows with integrity, to bend systems without breaking laws that mattered, to know when to hide and when to fight. He instructed me to open a file on the laptop. Crown 7. A spreadsheet appeared, shared distributions, holding companies, transfer records. My eyes snagged on one line. Noah Grant, 55% controlling interest, Grant Logistics Incorporated. I blinked. That's not possible. The will said I only had 10% in trust. That was the version your brothers were meant to see, Harrison said, his tone unwavering. Your father wrote 17 drafts of his will, each one a different test. The document that went public was just a decoy to expose greed. I stared at him, speechless. When the countdown on your phone expired this morning, he continued, the hidden trusts activated. 45% of company shares transferred from shell corporations your father established years ago. You now control the majority stake. It was surreal. In less than a day, I'd gone from living in my car to owning everything my brothers believed they'd inherited. They don't know yet, I murmured. They will, Harrison said, almost kindly. But by then it won't matter. He began to explain what Grant Logistics truly was, the dual face of a corporation built on profit and purpose. Every inefficient route Ethan had criticized was actually a humanitarian corridor. Every warehouse Lucas wanted to close doubled as a safe house or aid distribution hub. In the last month alone, Harrison said, our network delivered chemotherapy drugs to children in Aleppo, water purification units to Bangladesh, and satellite learning tablets to camps in South Sudan, all through legitimate shipments your brothers ignored. I try to steady my breathing. How did my father pay for all this? Cleverly, Harrison said with a faint smile. A fraction of profits redirected through legitimate rounding margins. Tiny adjustments your brothers never thought to question. Over 2 decades, those small details became $400 million in humanitarian assets. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. Encrypted notifications lighting the screen. Legal transfers, bank confirmations, ownership verifications. Everything sliding into my name in real time. There's one more item, Harrison said. Bottom drawer of the desk. Inside was another black phone, identical to mine, but already unlocked. Its contact list was staggering. Senators, governors, CEOs, foreign ambassadors. People whose names made global headlines. They're allies, Harrison explained. Men and women your father trusted to protect the foundation. They know who you are now. They'll be waiting for your call. I swallow hard. And what am I supposed to tell them? That Richard grandson is ready to continue his work, Harrison said quietly. But first, there's another matter. Your brother's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. You'll want to be there. Board meeting. You're the majority shareholder now, he said. Time to remind them who truly owns Grant Logistics. I spent that night in Building 47, pacing between glowing monitors and old memories. Every hum of a server felt like my father's heartbeat still echoing in the room. He hadn't abandoned me. He'd forged me. When morning came, I shaved, straightened my father's charcoal suit, the one Samuel had kept sealed in a garment bag, and drove downtown through a pale, autumn sunrise. By 8:55 a.m., I stood outside the boardroom on the 37th floor of Grant Logistics headquarters. Through the frosted glass, I saw my brothers exactly where I expected them. Ethan at the head of the table, posture stiff, commanding. Lucas flipping through quarterly reports, tablet in hand, his cufflinks gleaming. I took a breath, adjusted my tie, and pushed open the door. The conversation froze. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. "Security," he barked. "Get this man out of here." I smiled, calm and deliberate. "You might want to hold off on that, brother." He stood, fury rising. "You have no right to be here, Noah. You're not on the board." I slid a folder onto the table. "That's funny," I said, "because as of 6 o'clock this morning, I own 55% of this company." Silence. Lucas blinked like he hadn't heard me right. "What did you just say?" "Check your emails," I told them. Legal just filed the updated shareholder registry with the SEC. Ethan grabbed his phone, scrolling fast. His color drained. "This is impossible," he muttered. "The trust." "Triggered," I said, cutting him off. "Everything our father built. All the parts you thought were dead weight. They belong to me now." Lucas slammed his hand on the table. "This is a setup. You can't possibly believe." "I don't need to believe it," I said evenly. "It's already done." Their lawyer, Harold Finch, stepped forward, face pale. "The documents are legitimate," he said softly. "I verified the signatures myself." The room erupted in disbelief, but all I could hear was my father's voice in my head. "Don't give up. Hold on, even when letting go seems logical." And now, standing where he once stood, I finally understood what that meant. My brothers had inherited power. I had inherited purpose. "Sit down, Ethan." My voice echoed across the boardroom, calm but steady. Every executive froze as I placed a folder of legal documents on the polished oak table. "I'm the majority shareholder of Grant Global Logistics," I said. 55% as of yesterday morning. The two security guards by the door hesitated, glancing at each other, unsure whether to move. Lucas grabbed the papers first, flipping through the pages, his confidence fading with each turn. "This can't be right," he muttered. "The trust was sealed. We'd have been notified if there were changes." "The trust was sealed from you," I replied evenly. "Not from the board or the trustees. The transfer triggered automatically when I fulfilled the conditions Father set years ago." I took the seat at the head of the table, our father's seat, the one no one had dared occupy since the day he passed. "Harold Finch verified everything this morning," I added. "You can call him if you'd like." Ethan's face darkened, a dangerous shade of red creeping up his neck. "You must have manipulated Dad somehow. He'd never leave control to you." "Then contest it," I said. "Hire the best lawyers you can find." Father already spent years making sure every clause would hold up in court. "While you're wasting time on that, let me tell you what's changing around here." Lucas leaned back in his chair, glaring at me. "You're out of your depth, Noah." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not out of purpose." I didn't fire either of them. That would have been small-minded revenge, and Father taught me never to make decisions out of anger. Ethan was ruthless, but effective with operations. Lucas knew how to talk investors into funding impossible ventures. They just needed to understand what our company actually stood for. 15% of all profits, I said clearly, will now go to humanitarian logistics, medical deliveries, food distribution, and disaster response. Lucas slammed his hand on the table. Are you out of your mind? That's millions of dollars. You can't just hand it out like charity. It's not charity, I replied. It's investment in people. He scoffed. And who's going to run this fantasy department? Those warehouse guys you love so much. Exactly, I said. 17 of them, to be precise. They've been promoted to management, effective immediately. Ethan barked a laugh. You're promoting warehouse laborers to management? They don't have MBAs. They don't even know what EBITDA means. They understand more than you think, I said. They've been running parallel operations for years, covert routes that delivered medicine, food, and clean water to people who had none. They've saved more lives than any boardroom in this building ever will. The room went silent. Even the air conditioning hum felt loud. Over the next 6 months, I told my brothers the truth piece by piece. About the foundation, about what Father built under the radar, about why some routes couldn't be cut for profit, and why certain shipments labeled as losses were actually saving lives. The moment that broke Ethan's disbelief came when I showed him a video Harrison Pike had sent from Jordan. A little girl, no older than 8, sat in a dusty hospital bed, holding her mother's hand. The caption read, Shipment 12B, chemotherapy delivered. That route you wanted to shut down last year, I said softly. That's where this medicine came from. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. Father authorized this, he finally asked. He built it, I answered. Every deal he made, every strange expense you couldn't justify, it all fed this. You thought he was losing his edge, but he was building a network to do what governments wouldn't. Lucas looked away first. Ethan didn't speak again for the rest of the day. It took nearly a year before Lucas knocked on my office door. The same office where the will had been read, where our family had fallen apart and started to rebuild. I owe you an apology, he said quietly, for everything, for assuming you didn't deserve any of this. He saw potential in all of us, I told him. He gave you the visible company because you could run it. He gave me the quiet side because he knew I could carry it alone. Lucas smiled faintly. You got the power, Noah. The money. The control. I shook my head. No, I got responsibility. Every choice I make affects people I'll never meet. Families in war zones, kids in refugee camps, doctors working without supplies. The money isn't mine. It's theirs. The control isn't power. It's purpose. 3 years have passed since that morning in the boardroom. The foundation has doubled its reach. We've opened humanitarian corridors in 12 new regions, delivered medical kits to over 30 field hospitals, and supplied school books to more than 200,000 children across 5 continents. Ethan runs daily operations now, ensuring the company stays profitable enough to sustain the mission. Lucas manages our public image and builds partnerships with governments and NGOs. We're not the same family we were when this started. We don't pretend to be perfect. But for the first time, we're united, not by profit or legacy, but by purpose. The encrypted phone still sits on my desk, unlocked now, waiting. Sometimes it rings. Sometimes it doesn't. But every time it does, I hear my father's voice in the back of my mind saying the same thing he used to tell me when I was a kid working summers in the warehouse. Don't just move the cargo, son. Move the world. Sometimes that phone lights up on its own. No ringtone, no alert, just a set of coordinates appearing out of nowhere. We trace everyone. Harrison Pike believes my father built a series of contingencies, automatic triggers that activate when certain thresholds are met in the global system. Maybe he anticipated crises years in advance. Maybe he trusted technology more than people. Either way, every time we follow those coordinates, we find someone who needs help, a stranded medical convoy, a refugee camp cut off from supplies, a hospital running out of power. It feels like he's still out there somewhere, guiding the mission quietly from beyond the grave. My father used to tell me, real wealth isn't about what you keep. It's about what you can afford to give away. Back then, I didn't understand. I thought he was just being poetic. It took losing everything, my home, my marriage, my sense of direction, to finally see what he meant. It took sleeping in my car and working nights just to afford a meal before I understood that generosity is the only currency that never loses value. When I found that locked phone, I thought it was a reminder of what I'd lost. Turns out, it was the key to discovering why I was still here. It unlocked not money, but purpose, not privilege, but responsibility. Every time we save a shipment, rebuild a bridge, or deliver medicine to a forgotten corner of the world, I realized something new about my father's design. He wasn't testing my intelligence or loyalty. He was teaching me to see worth where others see waste, to recognize hope hiding beneath hardship. This wasn't just a business empire. It was a blueprint for compassion disguised as commerce. And now, I understand why he chose me. Because I had to lose everything before I could value what truly matters. So if this story resonated with you, take a moment, share it with someone who might need to remember that pain can become purpose. Leave a comment about a time in your life when something you thought was a setback turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And if you believe, as my father did, that legacy isn't about inheritance, but about impact, subscribe to hear more stories like this. Because sometimes the greatest treasures don't come wrapped in gold or paper. They come disguised as trials, waiting for you to see them for what they really are, gifts in disguise. Thank you for listening to my story.